I have a whole series, 10 gallon, 20 gallon, 40, 75 gallon enclosures. What are the best reptiles? But what is never talked about is 120 gallons, and these are the 5 animals you are keeping in way too small of an enclosure that need 120 gallons minimum. My name's Adam, this is Diamond, you're watching Wickens Wicked Reptiles. Stick around. Sometimes, and by sometimes I mean often, I am criticized because I recommend larger enclosures than most people, or in days gone by, what was standard. But here, let's put it this way. When I first got into reptiles 15 years ago, 20 years ago, however long it's been, we were recommended that ball pythons should be kept in 10 or 20 gallon enclosures. So a snake that gets to 5 feet should be in an enclosure that is less than 2 feet long. Now, obviously, we know now that is ridiculous, but I think that we're still not there. I think snakes should have an option to move around, and if you treat them correctly and give them the proper parameters, proper space, proper enrichment, and proper lighting, they will move. And the reason that I know this is because I have had dozens and dozens and dozens, say ball python, let's use the example. I've had them in racks and I've had them in these enclosures. When they're in these enclosures with proper light and a lot of things to do, they're moving around all night long. A 120 gallon enclosure, by the way, is 4 foot by 2 foot by 2 foot. Let's just get to it. Number 5. Okay, let's just start it off because I spoiled it. Ball pythons. I get a lot of flack for this. No, they're fine in 40 gallon enclosures, which is what is recommended in a lot of places. Some people have upgraded to 75. You're both wrong. Here's why. Let's suppose that a ball python gets to 4 feet or 5 feet. That's generally where they're going to be. Maybe 3.5 for smaller males. They're going to need an enclosure, in my opinion, that at very, very minimum is the length and width is the length of that snake. So let's suppose that you have a 4x2, which is what I recommend. So if you give them a space that is 4 foot by 2 foot by however tall you want to give them, I recommend this because they have a little bit more space than just that. They can almost go the entire length. And in a perfect world, I think that snakes should be able to stretch out an entire length. If you see them in the wild, which I've been able to see many, many, many snakes in the wild, and all of them when they move are basically all the way stretched out. And there are snakes that I have found, sunbeam snakes, pipe snakes, all these snakes that you never see because they're always underground and they're above ground at night, moving around. So this is why I think the same thing with ball pythons. We also had a bearded, long-haired fellow who just went to Africa to look at ball pythons and how they are kept, and turns out they move around quite a bit. So I think that we should give them the space. And in my experience, ball pythons eat just fine in 4x2x2 enclosures. I've got no problem with any of mine whatsoever. Of course, it might take a little bit of getting used to if they're from a rack, but at the end of the day, as long as they have an enclosed space, like a hide, inside their enclosure to mimic the enclosed spaces like termite mounds where you find them oftentimes in the wild, ball pythons don't spend their whole life inside a termite mound. Just like they shouldn't spend their entire life inside a cramped little tiny enclosure. And for that reason, if you give them a cramped little tiny enclosure that they can feel safe in, sometimes like they would in the wild, it replicates their environment and you still give them a big enough space that they can move around when they want to. 120 gallon for ball pythons. Let's see if I have any audience left after I offended all the rack people. Not that racks are bad, by the way. There's a whole video right here explaining why I think racks are sometimes better. But anyway, let's move on. Before we move on to the next one, Diamond has something to say. What's that? Come here, buddy. You did? What did you get me? Diamond, you shouldn't have. Diamond is the king of this channel and he wanted me to be royalty too. And now I'm a lord, thanks to established titles. Established titles is a great way to preserve the natural woodlands in Scotland and also make your friends laugh in the process. In Scotland, it is custom. If you own land, you are a laird or an English or lord or a lady. So now I own 1 square foot of property in Scotland. I'm a lord. When you buy a certificate for yourself or somebody else, it comes with a plot number so you can see exactly where your plot of land is in Eldston, Scotland. And established titles will plant 1 tree with every order and work with global charities. 1 tree planted and trees for the future to support reforestation efforts. I like that. That's what this channel is kind of all about. And of course, you can literally change your name to Lord or Lady on your plane ticket, dating profile, Facebook, Instagram. Basically, you're legitimately a lord now. This is a real thing, as funny as it is. I can't wait to go through TSA next time. Yes, Lord Wickens, I can't. Please don't pat me down, TSA. So if you don't know what to buy for dad or mom or your sister or the secret Santa guy at work, make them a lord or a lady. And the first 200 people to buy with my link, which is in the description below, you get a plot effectively right next to mine. I can't wait to see how many DMs I get from Lord so-and-so after this ad. This is so awesome. This honestly makes such a great last minute gift, and right now Established Titles is running a Black Friday event, which is their biggest sale of the year. And if you use code Wickens at checkout, you get an extra 10% off. So go to establishedtitles.com/Wickens and get the coolest gift of the season right now. Number 4, blue tongue skinks. I love blue tongues. Now, there are many different species, right? You've got your Indonesians, which are really cool. You've got your Centralians, you've got your Northerns, which are from Australia, both of those. Even things like shinglebacks, again, from Australia. These guys need 120 gallons because they are an animal that's gonna be, say, up to 30 inches, or actually, Irwin's 32 inches. He's a big Indo, but he's 32 inches. And in my opinion, lizards need way more than, if I could do a perfect world, double the space, nose to tail for them to move, should be the minimum size of their enclosure. I think with blue tongues, because they're a little bit lazier and they don't move a whole bunch, you can get away with a smaller enclosure, but 120 gallons, in my opinion, from my experience, is still the minimum. I've got 2. One of them is a baby still, or a juvenile, so he doesn't have a full 120 yet. He's got half of 120, and he'll be upgraded just like Irwin into 120 gallon soon enough because he's big. Irwin is a big, big boy. He needs 120 gallons. Also, you don't want to grab them by their tails. He's kind of squirmy-wormy because they will drop them. But anyway, this is Irwin here, and he is a big unit, 32 inches. This is a big, big animal. He did not, in fact, want to stay out. The thing I think with these guys in comparison to things like, come here, buddy, bearded dragons, is they're not quite as handleable for the most part. Irwin's not going to bite me or tail whip me, but he also just kind of likes to be left to himself. But in that enclosure, he does move around quite a bit. I give him some logs and things to kind of climb on. And in fact, although this is a 120 gallon video, he is in a shorter enclosure. It's only 16 inches tall because they are kind of potatoes with legs. They don't really climb that much. So I think a lot of these animals would fit in shorter enclosures, but either way, 120 gallons footprint is what a blue tongue needs. And I mean, they eat prepared diets and salads and insects, and just blue tongues are freaking awesome. And there's a video all about them right here. Number 3, Uromastyx. Now, of course, there are a bunch of different species of Uromastyx, and I think the only one that wouldn't work in a 4x2x2 as a minimum would be the Egyptians, because Egyptians can get up to 36 inches. They're big, they're units of animals. They're also not the prettiest, and they're not the most popular for that reason, but they're just too big. Now, if you wanted something like a Molly or Sahara or Nate, these animals will generally stay under, well, definitely under 2 feet. Let's say as an average 10 to 15 inches. Of course, it depends on the species, locale, things like that. But either way, they're going to be a much smaller animal. They're going to be similar to a bearded dragon, but even smaller than that, a shrunken down version. The reason that I think that you should give them at least a little bit of height, even though they're not going to be really climbing machines as much as certain other animals, is because they need a very high basking spot, very hot, I should say. The temperature should be very high. I'm talking about like over 100 degrees for sure. Like that's too cold for a Euro, right? They're also gonna need a very strong UVB. I recommend 12.0 or even more, 10.0 at very least. So for that reason, you wanna give them a little bit of height to let that I guess, beam of light kind of dissipate and make a bigger basking spot. But also you don't want it to be so high that the UVB loses its strength. So use their manufacturer. I think Arcadia wants it 18 inches above, right? So just give them a little bit of a platform, and you want to give them a little bit of substrate to dig in. This is not a care guide, but I mean, Uromastyx are just freaking awesome. I love them. I don't have one just simply because I don't have room for another animal with such big space requirements that need such high basking temperatures. But let's suppose that you're into animals like Ackies or animals like that that have high basking spots. This would be kind of another animal that's perfect for you. And they do tolerate handling. Some of them actually kind of seem to like it. Well, not like it, but they definitely don't squirm away from you. If you get them as babies or as wild caughts, which is like very uncommon now, They might whip you with that tail, but I mean, they're not gonna bite you most likely. And what I love about them too is that they are herbivores, so they're gonna be eating salads. They're gonna be salad eaters for sure. I love this about these animals because, I mean, you don't have to go get crickets or anything like that. You go to the grocery store, you grow your own food, whatever, and that's another reason I love tortoises. But tortoises definitely do not fit on this list. So let's move on. Number 2, corn snakes. I know, this is gonna be like the most controversial one because if you look, PetSmart's gonna recommend a 40-gallon. I think they are so far out to lunch they'll never be able to find their way back to the office. Some people say 75 gallons. I think you're wrong. I think 120 gallons minimum because again, it's a 5-foot animal in a lot of cases, sometimes even longer than that. And they're very active, and being that they're diurnal, it's just more fun to watch them move around. I've got my corn snake, in a 120-gallon enclosure. He uses all of it. Corn is just freaking crazy. He just moves around like mad, and I love it. This is what I love about corn snakes. I made a video about how corn snakes suck. It's right here. And really, it was a propaganda film for why I actually love corn snakes, and you should get one too. But I think that the main takeaway there is that they're usually not defensive. They're easy to handle. They're a perfect size. And although they don't like smaller enclosures, although they're a kind of a smaller snake in that they're more slender, I just think that it's a great option. And 120 gallons, again, we're talking about 8 square feet of space. That's really not a lot. Even if you have a really tiny room, even if you have a 100 square foot room, 10 by 10, that's taking up 8 square feet. And you can have a dresser there, so it's really taking up nothing. I personally think that 120 gallons is no big deal. And if you want to get an animal like a corn snake and treat it properly, just get a 120 gallon enclosure. There's a link below, by the way, if you want a PVC one. This is not sponsored, but cages, you get $20 off if you use code WWR. I love cages. They're the best. That's what you see in the background. That's what I recommend. Or, I mean, build one out of wood. Just give them enough space, please. And number 1, bearded dragons. Okay, so I don't think I get as much flack anymore. I think most companies have wisened up and they would reflect that they need 120 gallons. Now here's why. Bearded dragons are semi-arboreal. So I would even advocate that if you give them more height, it might be better. I am going to put Diamond in a 4-foot enclosure eventually, but I think the minimum, what I recommend, 4x2x2, the big white one in the back, that's Diamond's house. There's a video right here on how I set up the entire thing. Substrate, some climbing branches, hot UV, or hot basking spot rather, high UVB. I use the 14.0 or 12.0, whatever the Arcadia one is. And that's it. I mean, feed them lettuce, or not lettuce, but feed them greens rather, every few days. Feed them crickets twice a week. Feed them roaches sometimes, maybe on an occasion some worms. They have a varied diet, really easy. I mean, the thing that kind of sucks is that they do need such a big space, but is it worth it? My opinion is yes. The reason that he's my co-host, the reason he's on a lot of the merch is because I love him. Like a family member. Does he love me back? Probably not. But I love him because he is amazing. If I have an animal that I want to take out and just handle, and they're not going to handle me back, this is what I take out. I don't have to worry about getting bitten. Well, he does scratch you a bit, but he's just climbing around. That's just what he does, you know? I don't have to worry about too much other than scooping his poop every couple of days, and that's it. These are the easiest animals of this larger size. I know that I did a video before about bearded dragons suck. Again, propaganda film. I think that if you want one, you should get one as long as you can take care of it properly. I love bearded dragons, and I want to know from you, what other animals would fit in 120-gallon enclosures that we recommend too small of enclosures for? Let me know in the comment section. While you're down there, please hit the like button. Please hit subscribe. It really helps the channel. And as always, a special thanks to the Patreon supporters. You guys are freaking amazing. You get discounts on all the Diamond merch. You know about all sorts of crazy stuff that happened at my Asia trip that I haven't talked about yet. For as little as $1 and more, you get $1 or more. Man, English is hard. You get all of that and more. And because we do videos on Mondays and Thursdays, that means I'll see you in the next one.